On page 30 of chapter 3, Andrews covers 4 definitions or reasons why rhetoric is so important and why rhetoric should be this larger umbrella term. Like, he's really arguing that it's not literacy, it's not just English, it's not any one discipline, it's this overarching idea. And so for him, and so I want to go through each of these 4 really briefly. And the first one is that rhetoric has a long history. Here with the first one, he's not defining rhetoric as like the practice, he's defining it as the theory. So if we look at a speech, and this is part of, I have so many concerns with ethos, pathos, and logos, but part of my concern with ethos, pathos, and logos is the misuse as a point of analysis. And so people will look at a speech and say, oh, that's ethos. That practice of analyzing a speech with a rhetorical concept is a kind of rhetorical analysis. Don't do it with ethos, don't do it with pathos, don't do it with logos. But the rhetoric that Andrews is defining here in the first one is not that practice, it's the overarching theory. How do we understand and how do groups discuss and then share meaning about what it means to communicate with others about something and why that matters? Those are the key pieces to the first one, is that we're dealing with a theory, and we're dealing with a theory of how people communicate. And what Andrews is saying, and he gets into this especially in the third and the fourth one, is that communication is no longer just oral, and it is no longer just written, and one is not better than the other. And because of multimodality, especially with digital tools, all of the above plus images likely exists. And it's mediated through a technology, which makes it even more complicated. Okay, so first, theory is a larger overarching umbrella that Andrews is going for, and then he's talking about how people talk about theory, which then leads to a second one, and he's really drawing on what we should have picked up from all of the rhetorical theory development. In an autocracy, rhetorical theory development doesn't happen. Rhetoric can always be used, but people don't have space and time, and they don't have political power to develop theories and to develop meaningful theories. Rhetoric as a broad theory develops and is discussed and is really important in democracies because people are participating in those democracies. And that active participation means that we also need a level of theorizing about the active participation and what's going on and how people are making meaning and how people are choosing to communicate and where they're learning to do all of that and where they're sharing those practices. So first, rhetoric is a theory. Second, rhetorical theory develops in democracies and in people-led governments. At some point, and in other countries, they may call it, republics and stuff like that. Not in autocracies, not in oligarchies, in democracies. Third is the focus on multimodality. Okay, so the term multimodality, unless you've taken a bunch of classes with me, might be new to you. Multimodality simply means that we learn, all people learn, in more than just one mode. We learn in multiple modes. Okay, so right now I have on a bright purple shirt. That is a part of how you are making meaning. I'm using words, I'm using hand gestures, so my physicality is a part of it, what I'm wearing, the fact that I'm in my office and there's a lot going on behind me, just books on shelves and all that kind of thing. This is multimodal. But so is the video. The video exists within D2L, and you're accessing it surrounded by text, and you're supposed to do something with it. And you're supposed to do something with it where I printed the article, and you're most likely using a digital version of it, and you're interacting with it in those various ways. All of that is multiple modes. And what Andrews is saying is any rhetorical theory that we discuss needs to be multimodal. If you look at people gathering, there are so many different modes of communication that are happening, again, in what they're choosing to wear, in what they have on their feet, in what kinds of materials they're carrying with them. And then if there are also devices or signs, think of like a football game or a basketball game. People bring signs, or they wear team colors, or they wear team logos. All of that is multiple modes of communication, and that's where rhetoric and rhetorical theory need to account for those multiple modes. Finally, fourth, Andrews is really arguing that English departments, and to an extent, and we haven't really gotten into it in this class, when we get to the 1960s, Burke develops the pentad, and we didn't really talk too much, we lightly breezed over Burke. But Burke in the 60s causes a huge rift in rhetorical theory. So we've already had a rift from philosophy. We've had a huge rift from psychology. So psychology, philosophy, and rhetoric all have the same foundation until the Enlightenment, and then you start to see the branches develop. And then rhetoric itself divides. There is a version of rhetoric that exists in comm that is studied differently with Burke at the center than there is in English, where writing and now multimodality are the center. And so there's overlap, but then there are differences, because ultimately comm has kind of claimed oral communication and English has kind of claimed written communication. And so Andrews is saying, but what about film? Because film has oral, but it also has literary, and so we need something that pulls all of that together. And so maybe we need to rethink where rhetoric lives and what it looks like, and why English studies can't be this narrow focus on literature. We haven't studied any literature in this class. I took one lit class in grad school, and that's it. The rest of my focus was rhetoric and writing. And so what does that look like for undergrads? What does that look like as a unified field? And then how does that help us understand rhetorical theory development more? Okay, so those are the first four, or those are the four. I want to see you define them in your own words. Let me know if you have any questions.